they put me through what we can call a kangaroo firing process because it's the personnel evaluation board. The director of security and the deputy director of security are the ones who make a decision. First, the deputy director of security makes the decision, and they don't have to follow the board's recommendation. So
Hmm.
I have no idea what the board is going to recommend. And even if the board will recommend just an admonishment, leave without pay, administrative, whatever, they can say, no, we're going to fire him. So I go through this process. It takes months. I submit a strong rebuttal. The rebuttal, they wouldn't send it to Congress for me. I had to send it to Congress. So I sent it to Congress, Senator Burr, and Senator Warner, the heads of the SISI, since the SISI had responded to me. Months passed by, and eventually they call me into the office, and they notify me that basically we have taken your clearance away from you, so you're fired. So now I'm going into a different phase. I still really haven't gotten anywhere with the first reprisal case. This second reprisal case, I'm having to go to the ICIG. I go to the ICIG. I get back a response to use Form 401. It's this infamous form that demands firsthand information of any allegations to make an Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act disclosure. One thing leads to another. I'm making the appeal of the Personnel Evaluation Board to the Director of Security. Obviously, he endorsed the decision. Next, my appeal goes to the number 3 at the CIA that works directly for Gina Haspel. I was officially terminated on September 27 of 2017. They still hadn't responded to my ability to retain a new attorney. The Office of General Counsel was still obstructing it. Finally, in November, after I was fired, they allow me to retain the attorney. And when the attorney starts looking into this in January, this is what they tell the attorney. He has been fired. The final appeal was turned down. We have nothing to discuss. So, I finally do those disclosures to the ICIG in February, March of 2019, and they immediately respond, you're no longer an employee. You don't have a right to file an Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act disclosure.
So it's like a circus. I mean, they say, okay, this is the process. And then when you try to go through the process, they say, no, you can't do this process because you're employed by us. And then when you're no longer employed, they say, well, you can't do this process because you're no longer employed with us. So, I mean, it's like, what's the point of even having the process? I mean, what's really, what's alarming about this is, for one, this is the government. The government's supposed to be working for the American people. So it's supposed to also function and it's supposed to be legal, law abiding. I mean, you expect this kind of behavior maybe from a corporation, a private corporation, and then they're supposed to get busted by the government, right? If they're breaking these laws. But this is the government. And so what is the recourse? I mean, for somebody, there's no recourse to go after the government. And what's worse about it is that, I mean, do you know of any whistleblowers where it was ever effective? Because it seems like the only option for a whistleblower in the government or in the CIA or in any of the intelligence sector, it seems that the only option is either, and I've had another guest on this show who also was a whistleblower, has a very similar story where they basically, he was working as a nuclear inspector of the nuclear facilities, and he kept saying, hey, there's some bad things happening here. And they just kept undercutting him and his career and demoting, trying to ruin him rather than actually take his complaint seriously. So it seems like your only options that are out there are go through the process that they've set up, that they've said, this is the way to do it when you've got complaints and you see problems, and then you have your career ruined. Or the option is you go to the press, you do some, you figure out some other way to blow the whistle, and then they throw you in jail and maybe in some cases for life. I mean, do you know of any whistleblower where this has been effective?
When I worked for the Office of Inspector General for the Intelligence Community under Chuck McCullough and Daniel P. Meyer, these two men were very protective of whistleblowers and went out of their way to help some whistleblowers. There's the case of an NSA whistleblower who had worked for Chuck McCullough, who's got reprisals while he worked at NSA. So Chuck McCullough took care of this individual, gave him a job at the Office of Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. And he was the first case and only case publicly known where the PPD 19 review process worked in his favor. Of course, this was minor stuff. This was basically a disclosure of $50,000 in misspent money and conference spending.
Right.
Okay, so this brings up another point.
Yeah.
If it's tiny, minute, little detail stuff, they'll look into it. Like the CIIG immediately sprung into action after receiving a disclosure of candy theft of about $3,000 within 60 days. They immediately, found the culprits and filed prosecution referrals.
Yeah.
But then there's another case. Andrew Bekaj, I would pronounce his last name. I may have butchered his last name, and I apologize if I did. He's an attorney. He worked for the CIIG. He and some of his colleagues, Jonathan Kaplan, they encountered some serious issues with David Buckley and Christopher Sharpley, and they alleged reprisals. They were fired. Literally, they basically suspended, the clearance is suspended. They're basically the same thing. You're basically forced to either quit or be in limbo. So they ended up quitting. But they filed whistleblower reprisal cases, and because Daniel P. Meyer and Chuck McCullough went out of their way to push forward investigations of the Andrew case and the Jonathan case, the Department of Homeland Security did a detailed investigation that left no stone unturned into the allegations against Christopher Sharpley and David Buckley. And they found reprisals against these gentlemen. But guess what? Even though they found reprisals against them, years later, to my knowledge, nothing has been done to restore the people that suffered reprisals. And the people who were caught doing reprisals, David Buckley was the chief committee member, staffer, working the J6 committee. And Congress had the audacity to say, no, he's not a bad guy. He's done no wrong. He's been a career civil servant for 30 plus years. He's going to be our chairman of this committee as far as the staffing side. So the problem here goes into who is the culprit. The key critical point here is a lack of failure by congressional oversight is what empowers these agencies to take reprisals and get away with it. They know they can get away with it, and they get away with it repeatedly, time after time after time, because Congress won't hold them accountable.
I always say Congress is the least effective branch of government. In fact, they're pretty much useless. They have just become it's a clown show. I mean, all they do is they posture for votes and for fame. They get on the news programs. They yell about a lot of stuff. I mean, they really are just totally and completely useless.
Political theater.
Yeah, it's a lot of political theater because they're constantly campaigning. They're constantly on the phone trying to get donors for their campaigns. They're trying to get more notoriety so that maybe when they leave Congress, they might be able to, I don't know, be a celebrity of some kind and make millions of dollars. I don't know. I mean, it just, they're really ineffective. And so I think it's a great point that you bring up that because they're so ineffective, I mean, these people are just campaigning all the time, that they're not actually doing their job, which is oversight, which is what they're supposed to be doing, the checks and balances. They're not doing the checks and balances on the executive branch, and they are just letting these issues slide. And what you've brought up are really serious issues. I mean, look, if there are, it sounds to me like there might be some DEI policies that have allowed certain people to rise up through the ranks and get certain jobs, and they're not really qualified, but they were somehow, maybe a woman, and so that's why they got the job, or maybe they were, whatever the reason might be. I mean, I'm just kind of, guessing that might have been the reason why certain people were given job opportunities when they were not really prepared for those job opportunities. They hadn't gone through like the war zones, like you'd mentioned before. And that puts people's lives at risk. I mean, if I were a young CIA officer and I was being stationed to one of these places in a war zone, I would hope to hell that the person that is in charge actually knows what they're doing and they're going to keep me safe. But it sounds like they're like out doing yoga and having fun and doing all the and playing and having social hour. And then when somebody says, hey, this isn't right, like this is going to cause this could cost lives, this is an issue, they say, oh, you shut up. And in fact, we're just going to run you through the ringer, and you might even lose your job because we've got to keep the diversity going, or whatever the reason, whatever reason for wanting to keep certain people in certain positions or whatever it is. But I mean, even just on that level, I mean, there's obviously the bigger level of the the whistleblowers that are like divulging serious government crime, like torture programs and spying on Americans and whatnot. We've seen their lives just totally and completely crushed by the elites and the establishment, the deep state, rather than actually addressing the crime, the issue. And you're saying, I mean, your story shows that it happens on every single level.
Every
It doesn't
level.
matter. It's just on every level. They've run amok, as your book says, a deep state run amok. They've just run amok, and nobody's watching them.
And you're right. I mean, these are serious issues because in my book, I discuss a whistleblower by the name of John Reedy, and he made some disclosures about some serious technical issues. And instead of fixing the problem, he basically ran into reprisal after reprisal after reprisal. He lost his clearance, and they never really fixed this problem. And according to press reports, this problem was so significant, allegedly, dozens of assets may have been rolled up and even killed
Jeez.
because of the technical issues. But you get into intelligence failures like 9/11 and others that potentially could have been avoided if whistleblowers have been listened to rather than
Right.
crushed and destroyed.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a broken system, and Congress is not doing their job, and that kind of is what this boils down to. Is there's always going to be people that try to protect their friends, their colleagues. They don't want people to get in trouble. That's just kind of human nature, I think. But that's why there needs to be this oversight. That's why there's got to be the other body that goes in and says, no, we have to actually be managing this stuff. What a crazy situation, Pedro. Where are you at now? Like, how are you doing now? You're not with
Well,
the CIA anymore, right?
no, I mean, I was officially terminated September 2018, but
Yeah.
reality, my last appeal, the answer came in December of 2019, which put me exactly 1 year shy of my retirement. So,
Oh my gosh.
so by the grace of God, I've been able to survive. But my priority over these past couple of years was get this book written to tell the world.
Yeah.
I mean, although I'm the protagonist in this book, I mean, it's much more than my story. I mean, the story is the story of the broken whistle, where whistleblower protections are completely broken, and,
Yeah.
and they matter. The reason why they matter is because, I mean, if you're not able to speak up, not just in the government but in society, you know, I mean, we got a serious problem. People need to speak up. The truth needs to be told. We have problems, and problems need to be fixed. If problems are not fixed, they're not going to go away. They're going to get worse.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting there crushing dissent because you want to protect yourself, you are part of the problem, and that needs to be called out.
Yeah, it really does. Pedro, thank you so much for being here with us and telling your story. I mean, look, the more, and we've heard, like I mentioned, I've had a nuclear inspector on the show with a similar story. We hear more and more stories like this, and as we see more and more instances of people being targeted who've blown the whistle, I mean, when it's just one, it's easy to ignore. When it's two, but once there's more and more of you that come forward and say the system, it is broken, the deep state has run amok, then people will hopefully pay attention to it, and actually something actually changes. In my opinion, the CIA should just go away. But so that would be the big radical change I would make. But I think it would be replaced with something else, and it would, and then again, it would be no oversight, and it would be probably worse, to be honest. So careful what you wish for is one of those situations. Pedro, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. We do have the link to the book down below, The Broken Whistle, A Deep State Run Amok. That link is down there for you guys to click on and get. Pedro, thank you for being here. Best of luck to you.